The Archbishop of San Francisco just escalated his feud with Nancy Pelosi and said that she will no longer be able to participate in Holy Communion. Now, many people don't know that Nancy Pelosi is a professing Catholic. However, in light of some of her positions on the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court Justice controversy, she is now at odds with her local parish. This declaration leads to multiple questions, like, is this a violation of church and state? Is this the Catholic Church overstepping their boundaries with a private citizen who happens to take some political views that they don't agree with? Or is this a Catholic Church taking a stand for biblical values regardless of the fallout? On this video, we're going to be looking at exactly what transpired, at what she was requested to do and refused to do, and exactly what the Archbishop says regarding Nancy Pelosi no longer being able to receive communion.
Ruslan.
Nancy Pelosi, the Catholic Church, so much more. To be clear, I am not a Catholic, and there's probably some theological differences I have, quite a few I may have. However, on this issue, this is very interesting, and I'm going to explain to you guys why that is at the end of this video, but let's just jump right in. Here's the statement from this Archbishop, and we're going to show a video of the Archbishop so you can kind of get a gist of who he is, what he represents, and what led up to this situation. As you have not publicly repudiated your position on abortion and continue to refer to your Catholic faith in justifying your position and to receive Holy Communion, that time has now come. Therefore, in light of my responsibility as the Archbishop of San Francisco to be concerned for all the Christian faithful entrusted to my care, I am hereby notifying you that you are not to present yourself for Holy Communion, and should you do so, you are not admitted to the Holy Communion until such time as you publicly repudiate your advocacy for the legitimacy of abortion and confess and receive absolution of this grave sin in the sacrament of penance. This dude was not messing around at all. Like, he went for the jugular. Now, some of you guys are wondering, like, what led up to this? Because the way this is being painted is that he's just kind of coming after her. He's attacking her, this whole bit. So I'm going to show you guys the quotes from her. Okay, so she says this topic. So this is about the Roe v. Wade thing that came out a couple of weeks ago in terms of the Supreme Court justice overturning this. And I'm going to come back to some of the Supreme Court justice here in a second and how this all connects. She says, this topic really gets me burned up, in case you didn't notice, because again, I'm very Catholic, devout, practicing, all of that. They would like to throw me out, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to make their day. The Catholic Church responded, for too long, Catholic public officials have created confusion and disunity by advocating for policies that destroy innocent human life, in direct contradiction of the teachings of the Catholic faith. The persistent disobedience of these public officials is a source of erroneous sadness and scandal that begged for a response. And Pelosi met with Pope Francis last year, where the Vatican did not say if the topic of abortion was discussed. Pope Francis has compared having an abortion to hiring a hitman, but has also been cautious about suggesting politicians be barred from communion. Wow. Let's look at this Archbishop and some of his views regarding this, because I think this is very telling in terms of what he believes and how important he believes. And then there's a video we're going to look at of him actually addressing this situation head on. So check this out.
I wanted to draw this parallel because at the middle of the last century, civil rights was the paramount human rights issue of that time. And we shudder in horror nowadays when we think about the treatment of African Americans in the pre-civil rights South. The immorality of it is so clear to us, and it's very shameful that this happened. So the Archbishop of New Orleans at that time was on the forefront of moving toward civil rights in his archdiocese, and was opposed by some prominent Catholics. He was accused of meddling in politics. He was accused of, taking the church back to the Dark Ages when he excommunicated those 3 prominent Catholics. I wanted to draw that parallel because abortion now is the paramount human rights issue of our day. If we think about what happened in the South, not only segregation, but even lynchings were carried on, and they were condoned, and people got away with it. And there's a certain cultural blindness that sets in, that blinds people to the injustice, and it's reinforced by the powerful people in the society.
Wow. So he says that abortion is the sole, like, biggest issue of civil rights, human rights in our time. Okay. So to give you guys some context, this is the position that this guy has taken publicly. And this is from a couple of months ago. Okay. And regarding the Texas heartbeat law. Now listen to what he said specifically regarding Nancy Pelosi and her positioning on this and why this is important. And something recently also came out with President Biden potentially being refused communion because of similar views with regarding to Roe v. Wade. So check this out, and this is him specifically addressing. This is today. This is from America, the Jesuit Review.
The leak decision and the Dobbs case really have nothing to do with it.
So he's saying the Supreme Court decision has nothing to do, according to him, with his decision to basically execute church discipline against Nancy Pelosi. He's saying it has nothing to do with it, and he's going to explain what has to do with it.
Timing of it. As you mentioned, I've been trying for quite some time she did meet with me, speak with me over the years a couple of times, but more recently with her advocacy for codifying the Roe decision in federal law, it's becoming more and more extreme and more aggressive. And
so he's saying, look, I've talked to her in the past, but recently she's been dodging me. And it seems like her views on this are becoming more and more extreme.
I've been trying to speak with her about this. I've been debating this within my own conscience for many years, actually. So this is not something that's just come up recently. I've been discerning this. I've consulted with people whom I respect for their intelligence, their integrity, and their pastoral sensitivity, who would have different sort of perspectives on the situation to get their thinking on it. I've done a lot of prayer and fasting. So I've been struggling with this for a long time.
Can you talk a little bit more about the process for informing your conscience and making this decision?
Yes. First of all, one has to be clear about what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so let's be clear about this, that the point of our conscience is not to decide what's right and wrong. Forming our conscience is a process of helping us to figure out what, in principle, what is right and what is wrong.
Our conscience doesn't decide what is right and what is wrong. Forming our this is some interesting stuff this guy's saying.
Conscience is to help us make the right decision in a specific situation based on what is right and wrong. So
our conscience is there to help us make the right decision based on what is right and wrong, not forming and telling you what's right or wrong.
Informing our conscience, again, it's these three principles: the need to address the injustice, to repair scandal, and to move the person down the path of conversion because of the spiritual harm it causes themselves. So in this sense, I was also following the advice that, Pope Benedict, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger in charge of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, sent a letter to bishops here in the United States back in 2004, when he gave us advice on how to approach this, specifically with politicians, Catholic politicians, and specifically on the two issues of abortion and euthanasia. And he said we need to meet, to dialogue, to try to move them down the path of conversion. And if after several attempts it comes to the point where it's clear this is not going to happen, then the bishop or the pastor, he says, is to declare that the person is not to be admitted to Holy Communion. So I'm guided by the principles articulated by Pope Francis and taking the approach of the advice that then Cardinal Ratzinger gave us.
This is a top-down issue for them. Now, some of you guys who are Protestants, you may not understand how this works. Maybe you grew up in a different type of tradition. I'm not a Catholic, but I have some friends that are Catholics. And listen, there's orders and there's authority and there's ranks in their structure of church, and it goes back. And it's not just something where, well, you could be your own autonomous person over here and believe and feel what you do. No. There's certain lines that Catholics are required to fall within, okay? And it's not the same as Protestant churches where you could have all these independent churches. No, there's a top-down approach, okay? And the Pope oftentimes declares doctrine almost, if you will, right? And so they're gleaming and looking at church tradition and scripture, and they're forming their doctrine, and you don't just get to, I kind of just do what I want, right? Like some folks can get away with that in some Protestant circles. Notice I said some, but within this tradition, in this structure of church, that's not how this stuff works. I'll get into a second of what the actual views of the Catholic Church are, because I just had a conversation about this with a good Catholic friend of mine. And some of their views on this may surprise you, but it will make this less of a surprise. I'll say it that way. Some of their views on these topics may surprise you, but it will make this situation less of a surprise. But before we do that, let's go to our sponsors. Hey, this video is brought to you today by our very own Bless God Shop. The name Bless God is inspired by Luke chapter 2, verse 28, where Simeon encounters a baby Jesus in the temple and proceeds to, quote, bless God. The apparel is intended as a daily reminder to live our life in a way that brings honor and blessing to God. Check out the link to the shop in the description or in the pinned comment below and pick up some of the most sustainable and high quality apparel out there. Make sure you smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. We've been getting some reports that we may be getting shadow banned and YouTube may not be surfacing these videos. So make sure you smash that like button one time. It costs you nothing. It really does help shoot this up the algorithm. And if you aren't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, turn the bell notification on. Over 50% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed, so do that for me. So here's some things you guys may not know regarding Catholic teaching on this topic. It's different than Protestant teaching. One of the things that many people don't know is that the Catholics aren't just pro-life in the sense that they believe life starts at conception and abortion is bad and it's the murder of a child. Like this, it's not just that. They believe that you aren't supposed to get in the way of even starting a life. Meaning this, they don't believe in condoms. They don't believe in birth control. They don't believe in a lot of things that someone like myself will be like, oh yeah, no, condoms are fine. We should help educate people on sexual education and give people condoms who don't want to have kids because that'll help prevent unwanted pregnancies. No. Condoms in the Catholic tradition aren't accepted in Catholic marriages. They're not accepted. So you have to understand that the mentality they're coming with is substantially more conservative than most evangelicals. Why am I telling you this? Well, because many if not all of the Supreme Court justices are Catholics that are voting against potentially overturning Roe v. Wade. So you also have that layer on top of it, right? So when you see Nancy Pelosi, who's making these wild statements about abortion rights, okay, and her wanting to codify Roe v. Wade, even though the Supreme Court justice looks like they're going to shut this thing down and send it back to the states. When you see her making those types of statements, it shouldn't surprise you based on their own theology and what they believe and how conservative they are about sexuality, that they would have an issue with her or Joe Biden or any other pro-abortion Catholic taking these sorts of stance. It's in direct opposition with what the church is teaching and has taught for thousands of years. Okay, so I think that's the part where it's like, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't say, I'm practicing devout Catholic, all of that, but I think abortion should be available on demand up until, you know, at the most liberal levels, okay? What am I talking about? Most European nations, I'm talking France, I'm talking Italy, okay, have a ban at 12 weeks, 15 weeks. America is one of 7 nations that has elective abortion available past 20 weeks. Okay, so that's something that folks don't know about. So when you're factoring in all these variables and you're seeing this and you're like, how could they? They're singling out Nancy Pelosi. No. Nancy Pelosi chose to profess to be a Catholic. She chose to follow the teachings of that church. She chose to be around whatever parish she's a part of. And because she is now in conflict with their views on this topic, it's different. It's not like Protestant where we could read and be like, oh, well, I don't interpret that verse that way. No. When the Pope says something and he passes it down to however they're structured with the archbishops, that's doctrine, fam. They're putting their foot down and they're saying, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to, and if, okay, you play around, mess around, see what happens. All right, we're not going to let you take communion. We're not going to let you partake. I mean, this is a pretty gangster move on the Catholic Church, if you ask me. I don't know how else to say it, right? I think this is congruent with what they believe. I think this is congruent with their values. And I think they, unlike many churches, unlike many camps, are actually implementing something that we see in Scripture, specifically in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, which is when somebody's out of pocket and living or professing and doing wild things, they're infusing church discipline. Now, if you're a Christian, you may be like, well, my church ain't doing it this way. I do it this. Okay, that's fine. Your church may not do it this way. That's what they're on. Okay, so Nancy Pelosi, she either has to choose to submit to what the church teaches and back off from some of the wild political rhetoric she's been giving in terms of being very pro-abortion, or go be a progressive Christian. Go find a different camp. Go, right? Like, those are your options. But I think we're so consumeristic and entitled with how we approach these things that, like, you think you just have this buffet style of Christianity where I could just kind of pick and choose what I want based on my temperament or based on my views and my convictions. That's not how this stuff works, especially when you're talking about thousands of years of church tradition, hierarchy, all their different nuances and idiosyncrasies. I think they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're standing by their convictions, right? And if somebody's coloring outside of those lines, and I think, by the way, I don't think this is about coming down on Democrats. They said that, I just read this today, they said that 3 out of 10 Democrats identify as pro-life. There's pro-life Democrats that have been elected and been in positions of power. So I don't think this is like a everything Democrat. But on this issue, it's very hard for me to justify how a Democrat can be congruent with the values of being a pro-abortionist. Right? I think it's a stretch. I think it's a reach to assume that you can be pro-abortion and a Christian and a follower of Jesus, okay? That doesn't mean I'm not saying like anybody that's registered Democrat. Like, I just found out that Billy Graham was a registered Democrat his whole life, okay? So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying here, though, if you're doing stuff and you're out of pocket and you're professing to be a Catholic, they're saying no. And are we going to see more of this in the Christian church? Do you guys think we're going to see more of this? You guys think there are going to be more evangelical pastors to step out and be like, nah, should there have been more of this with some of the pastors that were around Donald Trump that kind of let him get away with stuff, right? And didn't really check him on stuff, didn't publicly rebuke him on stuff, even though he wasn't really Trump was never really like a Christian or going to church. It just makes you wonder. But I think they're being congruent with their values, and I commend them for it. And if you want to hear Joe Rogan's position on this potentially changing on this topic of Roe v. Wade, be sure to click over here for that video. See you guys over there. All right? Peace.